Hello and welcome to Ready Bet Action. This is our college daily fantasy lineup episode. This is the point of the week where Stefan comes on and gives you some just killer picks for DFS, finding you some really great value. You don't give the win space. We're gonna kill it this week. Who saw CU coming last week? We didn't know. And so yeah, you're gonna give us some awesome plays. Stefan, give us a little reminder. We talked about this a bit last time, but just so folks know, like, how are you pulling? Like, what are you looking for when you're pulling these names? Just so folks kind of understand where this information comes from.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I do, is you want to first look at the slate. Usually there's between 12 and 14 games on the main slate. I like the main slate better. I don't find I do so well in like a main event, like a Monday Night Football type thing. That's not my bag, baby. But when you give me 12 to 14 games, I can find some value because I've done a lot of work with RotoViz, working on college football for so long. I've known most of these players since they were in high school, or at least freshmen if they were any good. So I've been tracking these guys for a long time. So these players on obscure teams or players who have transferred over, I've kind of got an advantage in having done some research on them in the past. So of course I'm not an expert like some, but more than, most casual listeners. So I've got that advantage. And what I'm looking for initially is like, just give me the spreads and give me the totals, and I'm going to do a quick implied total math and figure out where are we expecting to see some big scores. And a lot of times when you see a team with an implied point total of, or let's say a real point total of 42 points, like what CU had, you might be afraid of like, oh, what if they take out all their starters and put in backups? Well, firstly, that does happen. But remember, to get into a position to where you've blown out a team to put in your backups, it means people have been scoring. And while they may not have 10 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns, they might have 4 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns, So there's still going to be the maximum points there on the table for you to acquire. So I like to target those games. And then I'm looking for values, players on good offenses that maybe are about to break out. Maybe they've had a good training camp and they're just an injury away from getting those time those looks, or maybe there's a lot of people you got to price in DFS. Maybe someone's just been mispriced that week. And I think we have a few opportunities to take advantage of some of those. And sometimes you're just playing matchups and you're like, you know what, that could be any name under center. But against that defense, I'm going to go ahead and take my chances because at $5,000, that just feels right.
Yeah, that's great. No one that I know knows players as well as you do. I'm just waiting for you to invite me, like our next fantasy league, to be like Pee Wee to Canton League. Like,
yes,
like it's gonna be like we're drafting 5-year-olds playing flag football because we know they're going to Alabama someday. No, let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm excited to see these. We're gonna start off with the quarterbacks. Is that right?
Yep, we're going to go quarterback, running back, wide receiver.
Perfect.
I typically I typically try to find a cheaper quarterback to put in that super flex position, but I know sometimes players like to go alternate routes and find value elsewhere. But typically my super flex is also going to be a quarterback. But there's 4. I'm doing 4 per position this week for you. For the quarterbacks, I wanted to do two kind of higher priced players, a mid price and then a low price. Shedeur Sanders, I've already talked about him a lot this week. He looked incredible. He may not have this as strong of an arm as like a Joe Milton, but he has accuracy. He has vision. If you watch those highlights, you've also noticed he has a few weapons. I mean, there's 3 legitimate great wide receivers on that team, plus Dylan Edwards out of the backfield catching those passes. And I think they like to use that short intermediate passing game instead of a run game, or as well as a run game. So you're going to see a lot of completions. You're going to see a lot of yards and I think some touchdowns too. Next, we have JJ McCarthy. This is often, also a play just against UNLV. UNLV, Brumfield, and some of their receivers there can, like Ricky White, a former Michigan State Spartan, they can get up and put some points on the board. So I think you see JJ McCarthy kind of air it out a little bit. At 9,100, it's steep, but I think they want him to feel comfortable throwing the ball because later in the year when they need him, they're going to want to make sure that he's ready to go. My next play, we're going to Purdue. I know we're going to Purdue, but they play Virginia Tech, who I don't think is very good. I think Purdue is going to have to put the ball in the air quite a bit. So this is more just a value play. Hudson Card as only 6,000. Yeah. I also think Hudson Card's pretty decent. Many of you might remember that he played for the Texas Longhorns at one time. So a pretty good prospect in and of himself. My final play, do you know where Jordan McLeod plays his football?
I have no idea where Jordan McLeod plays his football. I'm going to be totally honest.
He plays for James Madison. James Madison is playing Virginia.
How stupid
Jordan McLeod was not named the starter until this week. They split time last week. But he looks really good. He's a dual threat guy. So I think we get to see him put up some points. So again, if you want to pay up in other spots, Jordan McLeod is a nice way to attack that super flex position and get some value at just $5,000. So that's kind of what my thought process is on him. I would not recommend him being, your only quarterback on the week. Any thoughts on that before we jump over to running back?
Yeah, I would love, we talked about this a little bit pre-show, which is if I'm setting a lineup, maybe I'm a skeptical CU fan. Do we have concerns about Nebraska trying to limit possessions for Shedeur? And granted, if he rams it down their throat every time he does have the ball, maybe it doesn't matter. But is that a concern for you at all, that Nebraska is going to try to limit possessions for Shedeur? So you might lean more towards McCarthy, who might get some more throws in, just basic throws.
So it's Friday evening. I've only built out 5 lineups so far. So I've still got some work to do, but Shedeur is in 4 of those because I'm very confident in this CU team. I think Nebraska wants to want to air out of the ball. I think they're going to want to run it a lot, especially with Sims, and Sims might be a fun contrarian play. Maybe you do a Shedeur Sanders and Jeff Sims stack. I don't think Sims does much in the air, but I think he will run the ball an awful lot. But I think that the pace of play that we saw from CU with this buff and shoot, whatever they're calling it, veer and shoot style offense, I really think it's going to cause problems. And Minnesota is not putting up the same kind of talent and athletes that CU has got. You got Horn, you've got Weaver, you've got Edwards. I think Travis Hunter plays as well quite a bit because this is his first game at CU. We saw them script plays for him in the spring game, and I think we see something similar. I don't think he's going to play 120 downs or whatever the hell it was last week, but he'll be out there too. So I think Shedeur Sanders is priced appropriately at 9,400, and we've already seen that he has the skill set, and I think Prime has that mentality that if they are close to stepping on someone's throat, they're going to go ahead and do it. So he has the ability to break the slate.
Great. Let's move on to running backs.
Yeah, so a couple dudes here. Blake Corum, we already talked about Michigan. UNLV, I don't think is going to be able to stop them from scoring. Blake Corum was ridiculous last week. I had a lot more Donovan Edwards, the other running back there, but Blake Corum got the ball early and often, or whatever the expression is, and did great with it. Dylan Edwards, who we just talked about, I don't think he's putting up 49 points again this week. That's probably his max output for the year, but he's going to be involved in the pass game. You get those points, you get those yards. He's going to break one off at some point. He has that capability, and they like to put him in space. Rasheen Ali. Who the hell is Rasheen Ali? I'm glad you asked. He is the running back for Marshall. He is extremely good. He led that league in rushing last year. Extremely solid running back, and he's only 4,800. So while ECU is a pretty good defense, their defensive line is good. He is a quality running back. And he's a workhorse back for them. Kalon Black is, again, from our James Madison Dukes. We talked about that game a little bit already. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this play in and of itself, but because of that price point at 4,200, I think there's a lot of value there. He was their lead back last week, took over for the departing senior last year. So Black is a guy that I'm going to squeeze in in lineups where I'm going heavy, pricing on a Blake Corum or something like that. A Kalon Black is a nice way to save a couple $1,000 and still get a solid RB2. Any thoughts on those guys? I know you like Dylan Edwards.
I think just more questions. Obviously love Dylan Edwards. But I think my main question here that I think some listeners might have is, you have a Michigan running back and a Michigan quarterback. We have a CU running back, a CU quarterback. Would you suggest that you actually put them on the same team, or would you say like, no, like if you're going to take Shador, you're going to take Corum, or if you're going to take McCarthy, you're going to take Edwards? What's kind of the strategy there?
And so this is where college DFS can kind of differ a little bit from the NFL, in my opinion, is because you don't see many NFL teams putting up 60 plus points, but
Yep.
we saw numerous teams. Like the Ducks put up 80 points last week. So if you started Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, Bucky Irving, and Jordan James, like there are two running backs, the receiver and the quarterback, you still would have won because they scored 80 points last week. So because there's so much scoring, if you can get the right game, it doesn't really matter, especially when you consider a guy like Dylan Edwards, who's going to be involved in the pass game anyway. But you're going to see I have a CU buff wide receiver in my list as well. I have lineups with all three of them because I can see that game getting crazy. And if it hits the track meet, you're going to want as many pieces of that as you can because there's plenty to go around.
Everyone's gonna eat in some of these games. So yeah, let's speaking of wide receivers, let's move on. Let's talk about some wide receivers.
Yeah, so I already mentioned Travis Hunter. He's at 7,000. He's actually the cheapest of the CU buff receivers, and that's kind of why I went with him. Horn is the most expensive. I'm fine with you doing Horn, Weaver, or Hunter. I like Hunter because, again, the value, but then also I do think they want to, again, this is a rivalry game. It's on television. Don't tell me Prime doesn't know that. He knows that. This is all, and it's not because he wants the spotlight. It's because he knows this is going to get more dudes to see you, and it's going to help him win. Yes. So Travis Hunter is going to get targeted, maybe not as often as last week, but I think he delivers. Next, Roman Wilson. I won a piece of that Michigan game yet again. Roman Wilson, Blake Corum, Roman Wilson, and JJ McCarthy all ate last week, and I think they can do it again. Roman Wilson was definitely his main target, and at 5,400, I mainly just think he's underpriced. Deion Burks is Purdue's main receiver. At least he was last week. Again, Purdue has a fairly easy matchup, in my opinion, against Virginia Tech. I think Purdue's offense is a little bit underrated. They didn't have as many opportunities to score last week because they scored a defensive touchdown and a special teams touchdown. So they just didn't have as many possessions as you would expect on a given week. Final play is Dane Key, wide receiver for Kentucky. We talked about Berrien Brown last week. And one of the things that I think is important, Berrien Brown could hit this week. He's still priced more than Dane Key. So I like Key just because of the value there. But also Key was his primary receiver. And by he, I mean Devin Leary, NC State transfer, first year at Kentucky, taking over for Will Levis. And while Will Levis focused on Berrien Brown more, we've got a new quarterback in town. Maybe he prefers Key. Maybe it was just one game. We'll see. But I think against Eastern Kentucky, they're going to be putting up points. I think they want to get their offensive rolling through the quarterback position because Leary did struggle a little bit last week. So I like Dane Key to have a nice game again and feels like a safe play. And at $4,700, it just is another steal.
Yeah, I love these. I love that we have some consistency across games and teams and that you did the research. You are pretty confident and, CU coming out scoring points, Michigan coming out scoring points, and then the value has been consistent across your picks here for Purdue. That's my boy Ryan Walters. So I hope you're right. I hope they kill it this year. Great. So those are our suggestions for this week. Stafe, if you could do a real quick just recap of your suggestions for the people on the TikToks, we will get this wrapped up for today.
Yeah, so at quarterback, the recommendations are Shador Sanders at 9,400, J.J. McCarthy at 9,100, Hudson Card at 6,000, and Jordan McLeod at 5,000. For running back, we're looking at Blake Corum, 8,400, Dylan Edwards at 6,500, Rasheen Ali at 4,800, and Kalon Black for 4,200. Finally, at wide receiver, I like Travis Hunter at 7,000. Roman Wilson at 5,400. We've got Deion Burks at 4,800. And possibly the best value of the week is Dane Key at $4,700.
Love it. Do not forget to go check out our college football pick show, which will be posted around the same time as this. Get all those college bets in. Let's go make some money this weekend.
See y'all.